All right, so there was a recent story about how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was recently elected to her seat in the House of Representatives, she unseated corrupt Joe Crowley, who was second in line to Nancy Pelosi for the Speaker of the House. So he was a very corrupt, high-ranking Democrat, and she did unseat him. She ran on a very progressive left-wing platform. And there was a recent story about her because she talked about how for 3 months she won't have enough money because she's going to have to, start renting a place out in D.C. Now, this was what I thought was an interesting story because it gives you some insight on what it's like to not only be part of Congress in general, but obviously being someone who's 29 years old and has to now pay two rents, pay for rent for two places. And this guy named StyxHexenHammer, I'm sure you guys know who he is. He made a video about this. It really, in my opinion, was really pretty bad. I didn't really find any of it to be any valuable reasoning or logic or anything like that. It seemed to just be straw mans and really like some really just backwards logic that we're going to look at here. But go ahead and check this out and we'll come back and talk about it.
All right, everyone, you want to hear a joke? Marxist economics. Naomi Ocasio-Cortez is having a problem right now. Like I'm surprised. Does she have like a GoFundMe up or something? She should live stream and take super chats from people because apparently she's like, well, I don't start getting my congressional salary for the first 3 months. Then I get paid after 3 months. I've got to move to D.C. before then so I can start my job. And I don't have money for rent. Oh my God, it's so terrible. It's like, yeah, okay, you're 29 years old, unemployed, socialist. You're having money problems. Why am I not? See, this is why these people should not be managing economics for the larger economy. It will be a disaster if this sort of person becomes the new norm within politics. Thankfully, it seems like Gen Z, by and large, is less receptive than us millennials towards leftist economics. Like on a moral issue, it's like they don't care about like gay marriage and abortions. By the way, I agree with them. But economically, they're further left than the millennials, possibly because they're coming of age in the Trump economy when things are going better. She's a socialist. Oh, no, social democrat. Big difference there. Yeah. There's a big, when they use these little family-friendly buzzwords for political stances that are basically the same thing as something else, just use the pre-existent term. Social democrat is a misnomer. That's just a subgroup within socialism. No, I don't care if you disagree. We can debate this all day if you want to. You believe in redistributionism. You're just like, it's redistributionism with a heart. See, there's like a rose on our fucking logo and stuff. It's not really socialism. Well, it kind of is, but not really. There's a little bit less central planning. It's like basically a step beyond the interventionism we already have. Your social democrat style platform is pretty much economically what we already do. Most of the economic productivity of the Western world is siphoned off in the form of military, entitlement programs and welfare, and pensions and bureaucrats and things like that. The majority of the productivity goes that way. Every dollar you make, you're taxed when you make it. The employer's taxed. You're taxed when you spend it. You're taxed if you hold it. You're taxed constantly. It's a real free market situation. Basically, everything belongs to the government. You can pay rent to own the means of productivity in most states. It's called a property tax. If you have to pay a property tax on your business holdings, like you have a brick and mortar store, sorry, you don't own the means of production. A free market literally can't exist. It's impossible. But not surprised that a far left individual would have difficulty budgeting. It's like, if you had foresight, you would have seen this coming. You're like, hey, I don't start getting paid for a few more months, but I have to move there, before I actually start going to my job. I'm going to need an apartment or whatever. But thankfully, there's a free market enough online, Miss Cortez. You can start a GoFundMe or a Patreon or something. Yeah, there are people that would actually donate to you. You'd probably make $5-6 grand a month easy if you started a Patreon and just did like a weekly podcast or something. Because a lot of people know your name, and a lot of these leftist trust fund babies have more money than sense and will actually pay you to do things. So why don't you fucking just do that? And don't think it breaks any campaign finance laws. Maybe, kind of, sort of, like, that's one concern I had, was that I get Patreon money from people that aren't in the United States. I'm like, well, if for some reason I do end up on a debate stage talking to Halquist and Phil Scott, think that might come up as an issue. Trouble even when she is getting her congressional side. How much is she being afforded, by the way? What state is she from? She's a New Yorker, right? So she has to go to DC and stuff. And DC rent is high. Oh shit, look into it sometime. It's like San Francisco. But she's going to be getting a decent, at least high 5-figure salary. And you've got to understand something. Here's the other thing. People in Congress, in most positions, are also afforded a certain stipend for other expenses on top of their salary. Like, they get their salary, whatever it is. They also get a little congressional credit card, so to speak, that the taxpayers keep flush. That's for travel expenses, anything related to their job. For topical meal expenses, fuel for the fucking car and stuff. A little bit for rent. Its topical expenses are generally taken care of. The idea is that it's a fraction of their total salary. You're basically giving them free money that they don't even have to pay a tax on. I don't think that this should be done, by the way. I think that generally speaking, their salaries are high enough so they should be able to live in DC or wherever else. A meal at McDonald's, dude, you're supposed to be a servant of the people. Instead, I think that's been inverted over time. I know perhaps that sounds a little bit naive, but when you have someone who openly proclaims basically socialism, saying, oh, I can't pay my rent, there's the free market online, the one that you want to destroy, by the way, by deplatforming everyone else's edgy views. I think your views are edgy, so it'd be very funny if that ends up happening.
All right. So the thing about being a representative in Congress, in the federal legislature, is you have to have 2 residencies, because you have to have one in D.C. to live in, so you can go to, the House, and if you're in the Senate, go to the Senate. So you need that residency on top of another residency back where your constituency is, because you have to go, that's where you represent your constituency. So you go back to your, to your constituency to, talk to people and have town halls and different things like that. Those are the people who you obviously represent. So you have to pay for 2 rents, which is a lot of money. And not only is it 2 rents in this case that you're paying for, but AOC is from New York. New York rent is pretty high, and then DC rent is through the roof. So she's 29 years old, and she's going to be paying for 2 rents because she has to have 2 residencies, one of them in DC to go work, and the other one to come back to her constituency, in which she'll also be working, of course. So I don't understand where this, oh, you can't even budget your money. What are you talking about, dude? She went to college. She was 29 years old. She's 29 years old right now. And you're asking for someone to be able to pay for 2 sky-high rent costs on top of living expenses. Living expenses aren't just rent, right? I mean, you have all kinds of other stuff on top of that. So in what way? And also, there's a really big issue here, because I don't know why he's strawmanning her as a socialist, and he corrects himself in saying that she's a social democrat, but he does it in a very snarky and condescending way, as if, it's not a real difference. It's just some, I don't know what he said, like kids friendly or something like that talk. Dude, there's a massive difference between socialism and social democracy. You have to know this, dude. Again, socialism is an economy in which the workers own the industry. Social democracy is not that. Social democracy is capitalism with a heavy welfare state, with regulation. That's what that is. Okay, you're talking about pretty much all, pretty much all modern industrialized nations. You're looking at social democracies, right? Canada, they have universal health care there. Well, pretty much all of the other modern developed nations have one form of universal health care or another. They don't all have the same form of universal health care. They all have one that differs in some way. But the point here being is that there's a huge difference between calling for any sort of socialist nation that you could think of and what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is advocating for. Socialism is obviously post-capitalist, right? It's not capitalism. It is, we need to take out capitalism and we need to become a socialist economy in which the workers own the industry. That's not what AOC is advocating for. What she's advocating for is, let's keep the capitalism in place that we have. We need to make it so that we have a Medicare for all system, which will save us $2 trillion over 10 years, and also cover everyone in the United States, which is obviously a boneheaded, obvious idea. And, you know, things like free college, which could be easily funded by our bloated military increases that we do it feels like almost every year. We just had one where it was $700 billion over 10 years, dude. That could fund every single year for 10 years. That would fund free college education. It's not something that's, whoa, where's this money going to come from? And you could do a 1% Wall Street speculation tax. It's really not all that complicated. It's actually pretty simple stuff. And so what AOC is advocating for, and what, you know, someone who's, you know, advocating for, you know, we need to have full-on co-ops and no more private businesses. That's not what she's doing. So please, dude, don't do that, because you're just straw manning. That's the most blatant, worst straw man I've ever seen in my entire life. And not only that, but like, you have the gall to be condescending about it. Like, what is that, fam? You're throwing in this correction and then snarkily saying as if it's not a serious correction. It's a very serious correction. They're two very, very different things. Anyways, what's crazy about this is, and before I say that, hold on. I would prefer a 29-year-old who is going to need that money to kick in to pay for her residencies over some rich person who is so privileged, and that's why they're able to be a congressional member. I mean, I would much rather have that. That is so much more preferable, A, because those people are relatable to normal Americans, but B, they're going to represent our policies more, who went to college and obviously amassed a bunch of debt from it, and who's now having trouble covering too expensive, sky-high rent costs on top of living costs for 3 months until the income kicks in. I'd far rather have that, because A, that makes sense, and B, it's far, far superior and what, you know, is preferable to some rich person, because they're not going to be. And the thing is about this is, he literally disdains, you know, people who you know, would be rich in Congress. And so what I don't understand is why you're not making the connection of, oh yeah, this is a good thing here. And okay, so first of all, she's not a socialist, right? As I explained earlier, she's not a socialist. She's a social democrat. So where do you get this socialism connection from? A, she's not a socialist. B, where would you get that connection from? It doesn't make any sense. She's 29 years old, who graduated college, and is now going to have two massive heaping rent costs. Where are you making the connection? It doesn't make any sense. And so this entire segment is just filled with straw manning and just totally not explaining. And by the way, this is not a new phenomenon. Okay, this is something that's well known. Congressional members often have trouble doing this. There are congressional members who like sleep on cots and stuff. Dude, these people, it's really difficult to pay for two rents, especially when they're both sky high. So it's a lazy straw man argument. That's a loser ideology of an attack of, haha, socialist, which she's not a socialist. You go, socialists can't afford rent. It's like, dude, you're just making stuff up now, and you're not providing context. And you're just being ridiculous at this point, dude.